All right, welcome back to the Movie World Marathon. I'm Andrew,
And I'm Mac.
and we're
Woo.
at the end of another marathon. And honestly,
hmm
it's over too soon. It feels weird. This one, for me, it went by so fast, even though it's been like
hmm
2 months.
hmm
It's, I
For
think
sure.
it's,
For
I think
sure.
it's because of
Super fast.
Prometheus, because it made it feel like
Yep.
that doesn't feel like the
hmm
same marathon. You feel like this has been a
It's
slog, don't you?
just snapped by. Got
Not for you.
so much, so much.
No. All
Not
right.
time.
Yeah, well, we're on Alien Romulus, the latest in the Alien franchise, directed by Fede Alvarez. Came out August
Alvaro, yeah.
16th of last year, 2024, and starring brand new faces. Got Kaylee
hmm
Spaney as Rain, Robert Bobrowski. Oh, yeah, we'll come back to that. Isabella Mercede as Kay, David Johnson as Andy, Trevor Newland as a xenomorph. That's cool. He was credited. Good for him.
Oh, that is cool.
Eileen Wu as Navarro. Spike's Fern as Bjorn. His real name is Spike. That's cool. And Archie Renew
Oh,
as
and I thought
Tyler.
Bjorn was funny.
Yeah, seriously. So yeah, brand new cast, brand new faces. Yeah, and I've seen this movie once. I believe this is your first time seeing this one.
It was my first
So
time.
how do we feel about where this marathon, not this franchise, where this marathon comes to an end?
It feels like a return to form.
Indeed.
I saw more parallels in this film to the
Mm-hmm.
first film than I saw any other lineups than any of the other
Mm-hmm.
films in the franchise. And there were more parallels in this film than I saw in any of the sequels to the first one. So,
Yeah.
like, not only does this one primarily reference Alien, the first film, it also is the movie that references it the most in the
Mm-hmm.
franchise, I would say, which I thought was pretty cool. There was a lot of intentionality in that and making it feel like it matched or rhymed without being the exact same thing. The
Mm-hmm.
whole sort of like almost in what they call it hypersleep, what
Yeah,
cryosleep,
the cryosleep.
and then you have to race and put on a spacesuit, and you got big guns, and you've
Mm-hmm.
got some creative problem solving. You've got your determined female survivor. Like there's a lot that was really cool in this one. I don't want to jump to the end too soon yet. So I
Fair enough.
guess
Fair
I'll
enough.
let's say it feels the closest to the first film in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
but there are also some clear departures from the things that make Alien Alien, and I don't know how I feel about those
Interesting.
departures.
Okay, I don't know what that would be right off the top of my head, so I'm excited to talk about that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Suffice to say, we're not really doing a recap because it'd be a little clunky at this point. If you're listening, which you're
Yeah.
not, the 25 of you that have subscribed, we appreciate you. We see you. But if you're listening, you've seen the movie. You know what it's about. That's fine. But yeah, I totally agree. I think this is almost a better sequel to Alien than Aliens is. I
Mm,
feel like honestly, this feels like a
sure.
natural progression from Alien to this to Aliens, because
Mm-hmm.
if you
Mm-hmm.
took the concept of Alien and dialed it up to 11, like we like to say, going from a spaceship to a space station and dealing with more space things makes more sense. We're dealing with zero gravity, we're dealing with temperature changes in the ship. Like I really dig all that. A lot of this is also inspired by the game Alien Isolation, which is technically canon. It actually follows
Okay.
Ripley's daughter. Um, so that a lot, if you've played that game, you see a lot of that in this movie. Like, I think there's even something where the movie they will pass the things that are checkpoints in the game as a way to kind of mark
Oh,
like
cool.
chunks of the film, which is yeah, it's very
That's
cool.
really clever,
Yeah.
actually.
But I agree in that it feels like an alien movie more than the others, and like right off the bat, just the ship that goes out to find the destruction of the Nostromo, the visual aesthetic of it immediately is alien,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I love that stuff. I love the classic look with the modern day effects, and it makes me think that Prometheus and Covenant would have benefited from just doing that. Because if you take the xenomorphs out and you just do like a clip of Prometheus or Covenant, you'd almost wonder, especially because of like Idris Elba and Wong, that it's an MCU movie. It's a spaceship with holograms all over the
Yeah.
place and whatnot. But like you could take a clip of almost any moment from this movie and it's Alien. Like they get the aesthetic down, and I love that. I like to see that we see a terraform planet and see the shitty end of it. I like their ship. I can't remember what it's called. The one that the kids basically own or fly around.
I don't think I wrote that down.
It's like starts with the C, something like that.
Yeah.
But then like
Tani or something.
Yeah, but like the design of the Romulus Remus station is amazing. The ship that goes out to the Nostromo is amazing. The xenomorph practical effect and CGI, like it was something I don't think we talked about a lot in Covenant. It was cool to see the xenomorph be a VFX creature and be able to move around as supernaturally as it could, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It still looks weird in Covenant. Like it was still kind of jumpy or choppy. They nailed it in this one. I think they really, really finally crushed it. It's running around like this weird monkey panther, and it looks the most believable. It looks it's like utilizing its anatomy in ways that I don't think the other Alien movies have been able to fully bring to life, with the limitations of special effects from the 80s and the 90s and so on and so forth. And in this one, I think they crushed it. I like most of the characters. It felt like a return to form, like you said, as far as these are on the ground working class folks. But I think it was cool that they're all basically kids. Like, again, changing it up. Like, it's not just the truckers. It's not soldiers. It's not even like what I wanted scientists. It's the youth, if you will. And I don't know if the film really capitalizes on that, but it does feel different enough that I think it was a good choice. It's just there's only really two and a half characters that I think we spend enough time with to actually care. I'm so curious as to what you have to say about that.
Kind of agree. I think that's actually one of the ways in which it lines up pretty closely with the first film, which is to say that the cast of characters is narrowed down pretty quickly to the few that you care about. And it's always pretty clear who, well, that would be different in this film. I would argue in the first Alien film, it was not super clear that Ripley was about to become the lead. In this one, it is very clear that Rain is the character that you were following.
Yeah, that's true.
The fact that they're young kids is an interesting change, I guess, to the story. Because this is the part of like where it's a return to form, but there's also some clear changes that make things, in my opinion, slightly weird for an Alien film. The first one is the return to form is they are clearly exploited workers of the company, which we now have a name for, Weyland-Yutani, and they are dealing with that, right? But the clear difference that they choose to make for this film is the reason they are in danger is because they are rebelling against the system. Like, the reason that most of the crews in the other, or especially the early Aliens films, are in danger is because they were doing their jobs and the company intentionally puts them in danger. In this one, they're kids who arguably are in danger because people are getting sick and dying around them because of the jobs they're given. We see that Rain has reached her like contract amount of work, and then for some arbitrary reason it gets changed and basically doubled to keep her as an employee. So they are in danger through the company. But in order to encounter the alien, which is the ultimate representation of the company's corruption and threat to society, they have to try to rebel against the company. They actively disobey orders to get to the ship. They disobey the safety regulations. They're breaking into things. And that does change the tone a little bit, because if they had done nothing, then they probably would have died slowly in the colony as workers in the mines. But they would have lived longer than going to find the aliens. So, like, it puts a small twist in the theme of the thing, because the theme in the first two is pretty direct.
Mhm.
These people are just people doing their job, relatively trusting their company to make sure that their job is going to be safe for them, right? They're accepting the risks of space travel. They're not accepting the risk of picking up a bioengineered killing weapon.
Right.
And so that's like a very clear statement as to the recklessness of the company and how little it cares for its employees.
Mhm.
We still get that in this film, but the direct threat through most of the film is kind of brought on by the characters themselves. And I think that complicates things a little bit in a way that I'm not super happy with.
Interesting. See, I find it intriguing, and like, I mean, you touched on it already, that it's still it's everything is still kicked off by the damage and the pain, if you will, that the company causes. So the fact that the character's motivation is it's driven by desperation with a smidge of hope, it's still just brought down by the company's actions. I think there's something there, and I do enjoy that, because if this movie was, I mean, there's a little bit of this, you could say, in the real world. This is a massive course correction, you know, for the Alien franchise, getting back to the roots, getting back to what worked, because they kept trying to do these cool prequels and explore God, basically, and no one really liked it. So we went back to running away from xenomorphs in space. But instead of trying to do something wacky and, you know, clone Ripley again, or bring in a different military guy, or find, you know, pursue the people who found the xenomorph and are trying to clone it and whatnot, we're pursuing the perspective of just people who exist in this universe, who get caught up in, you know, who are collateral damage in the actions of this really shitty company. And as far as the perspectives you could pursue in a prequel, back in the good old days of Alien, if you will, I think that's a really, really good way to go about it. And I think it's relevant to, you know, today. Like, it's a huge thing on the internet, on Reddit and TikTok, is, you know, dealing and fighting corporations and stuff. So I think I think they did it well as far as course correction goes. I understand it's different from the previous movies, but there's a certain amount of the like Alien 3 and Alien 4. It's so convoluted, and Ripley just keeps getting pulled into things over and over again. Like, she doesn't really drive anything. She just keeps getting stuck in things. And, you know, all of Covenant is just because Covenant was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and David was sending out the signal. So, like, there is a certain amount of Romulus that has characters that have their motivation, that have their drive and their goal, that is completely separate from anything related to the xenomorph, which is a first for, you know, a while. It's been a minute since we've had that, technically speaking. And so to have that, and then for the xenomorph to come into it in a fairly like natural way, I don't know. I can see where you're coming from, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, if that makes sense.
I suppose. I don't know. I'm still not totally satisfied by it. I think a part of this, you actually kind of touched on earlier, a part of this, what's making me feel a bit thrown on this, is the youth of the characters, because that feels intentional, but there's no good reason for it that I can think of plot-wise, and they're all young. The only, like, in-world reason for all of them to be young is if this is a colony largely populated by young people, because you don't live past like 40 or 30, right? And in that case, that would normalize things. But the way that they have them sort of like stylized, and the way that they're sort of filming the movie, it makes me think the real world reason they cast a bunch of kids is because they thought it would garner more audience attention. Like, just going off the idea that young faces are usually considered more attractive faces, which are going to go ahead and bring people to the theater rather than having something to do with the story itself. It's possible that there was an aspect of the fact that they're young that was supposed to be a part of the story that maybe they cut or just didn't make it to the final draft or something. But to me, the fact that they're young, the fact that they make a risky decision that then puts them in danger, all of that undercuts the message that as an adult, one day you'll just be working your job and then you'll suddenly realize your company doesn't care for you. This frames it almost like a Hunger Games style dystopian rebellion that goes horribly wrong. And that flavor feels wrong in an Aliens film because, again, they already know that the company's no good. We already know as an audience the company's no good. And I'm not even totally complaining about the way at the beginning of the film starts. It's just, I don't know. The whole thing hinges on the idea that the company will put you in danger so they can get what they want, which is a weapon, which will put more people in danger. And the fact that the call to action comes from the characters and not the world or the company, I don't know. I don't think it's as strong as the other films. I hear what you're saying about terms of like agency and stuff like that. And it's maybe if we had framed it slightly different, it wouldn't bother me. But the way that it is currently set up, I'm just kind of like, they spend a lot of time making the decision and they spend a lot of time talking about the decision. And so it's very clear that decision comes from the characters and not the situation that they're put in. And I don't know.
But like,
I guess maybe it's a personal thing.
The only reason they're having the conversation in the first place, though, is because of the situation they're in, because of the company. Like, the company is still driving all of this. It's just, we're seeing it from the perspective that isn't directly Ripley, the military, or one of the company managers. Like, this is the people we don't see that are affected. Very much like the first Alien movie. Just, they bring themselves into it. Like, I think you could argue one of those weird debates of, is there free will, right? Like, they put themselves in the situation. Sure. But do they? Because they're only desperate enough to consider this because of the negative actions that the company is taking. Like, I don't think Rain wouldn't have done this at all if the company wasn't scummy and doubled her year quota. Sure. Like, she wouldn't have done it. She just would have left because she would have been able to leave. And I mean, they're all kids, and I think they've created this community they have because all of their parents have died. We see, like, Rain looks at the older people who are already in the mines, like, there is an older population here, but these kids have all lost their parents. Not even at the same time. Rain lost her parents, like, 4 or 5 years ago, not a while ago. It's referenced that Bjorn lost his parents just a year or two ago. I don't know what they say about Tyler and his sister. And for all we know, Navarro's parents are alive and well, but she doesn't give a shit. You know, like they've made their own community. And I feel like we say they're kids, but they're like 18, 19, like they're early 20s, which is still kids by alien character standards. But they aren't like Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner. They aren't that young, but they look like it compared to the people we've had before.
I don't know. I think what bothers me the most about it is in the other films, when you make a choice that does not align with the company's goal, you have to deal with consequences, but you're ultimately usually rewarded for it. These guys make the decision to say, hey, we're not going to trust the company anymore. We're going to do our own thing. And they run face first into the company's primary weapon. So, like, there's just, I don't know. I don't feel like it lines up the way that it's supposed to narratively. Maybe I'm being a little bit too strict on the formula or what the theme is trying to say. I just feel like it's a weird choice to return so much to the original and then add this weird twist where the kids are semi-responsible for the situation they get put in. And even if you don't want to look at it as a responsibility, because the company's put them in an impossible situation, kind of, what is free will anyway? They still, by making the choice that they have to make, they still run into consequences created by the company. Like, there's no right choice for them. And that it doesn't totally work either, because I mean, maybe that is what they're trying to say, but that's very pessimistic.
Yeah.
The fact that the choice they make to try and escape means they create a new monster and then everybody dies except for one person, arguably two. That's, I don't know. I don't know if that's what they're trying to say. That didn't feel like what the film was trying to say, but that's kind of what it all comes to.
I can appreciate your concern. We're going to have to move on because we're 20 minutes in and we're still talking about this concept. So
our one listener is gone.
Yeah, it's all right. But like, I mean, I can appreciate that analysis. But moving on, and again, just to touch on a positive real quick, I think a shining light in this movie is Andy. I love Andy.
Yeah.
I think Andy's crushing it. The actor does super well, and I love
Agreed.
I love the two performances as well. Andy just as is, and then Andy upgraded. Fantastic. So good. Love his presence. I always love the synthetics in these movies, and it's a really cool inclusion.
My favorites.
Me too. It just is, and I love Rain's love of him. It's just great.
It's cute.
On that, both kind of a positive, kind of a weird, kind of a negative. An Ash, whose name is Rook this time around, is back, which is bizarre. Because I think it's the only special effect that really isn't great is the weird face thing they do, which is a very bizarre choice because they recreated a head for Bishop in Alien 3. And it was one of the most advanced animatronics of the time in like 1990, whatever. I think you could have done better in 2024. But what's funny is I was watching this and I thought, wow, that's weird. That's not great. And then we got to The Offspring, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. But we got to The Offspring and I was like, wow, that CGI looks so good. And then I found out later, that's because it's not CGI. But we'll talk about that later. I know, I wanted to see that face. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about it later. But anyway, I can appreciate what they were trying to do with the Ash thing. I do not think it was necessary. It was bizarre. Special effects are better than that.
I'd like to see him again. I mean, I will admit the special effect is not what you wanted it to be. When I noticed it, I just went, it's a beat up synthetic. It's not supposed to look right. I'm never worried about it again.
That's totally fine. That's why I feel like you could have made the animatronic that to look like him, to be an Ash model or whatever they called it, in Aliens, and you could use the excuse that he's been acided in half. Like he's not going to look good.
Yeah.
But they chose to do this weird, Rogue One Leia facelift, and it's just too noticeable. It's not. No,
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's just a note. To talk about the other kids real quick. I just want to move through some things because there's other stuff that'll be longer.
Yeah, go for it.
They do, I think, kill off people pretty abruptly to the point where it's almost like you almost miss that they die, and then you don't really notice they're not there anymore. Like, I mean, it's just like Navarro, Bjorn, Tyler, they go so abruptly, man. So abruptly that it just kind of, it's almost, I don't even know how to word it correctly.
I think Tyler's sister's death is too fast. Like there's a lot of build up for it, right? Yeah. And it's also sort of like the ultimate moment where the utilitarianism thing comes into play with Andy. But like, I don't know. There's an interesting conversation to be had there because I don't think that Andy's wrong. I think if he had opened the door, I think they would have all died.
Well, she doesn't die there, right? That's the thing. Her death in the end, it almost feels like maybe she's gonna get out of it. So it is kind of weird that they do end up killing her off. But no, yeah.
She was a pregnant person in an alien film. Yeah. They were gonna do something. They're gonna do something with that.
Yeah, and they did. They do. They did. Yeah.
They do. Absolutely do.
Yeah, so let's see here. The Navarro chest burster. Crazy, the X-ray gun thing they have. That's fun.
I think it's a shame they only use that once. It's an excellent tool for this film.
Well, see, they put that scene in the trailer where she uses it, and everyone was like, wow. They spoiled the whole movie in the trailer, and the movie's like, no, we didn't. You have no
First
idea what's
30 minutes,
coming.
babe.
You have no idea what we have coming. So yeah, but they definitely could have played with that more. But that was rough. It's also, as I indicated weeks ago, we saw what it looks like when you take a face hugger off, and it is viscerally unpleasant. I didn't like that. I didn't appreciate that at all.
Honestly, the whole thing with the facehuggers, they do an incredible job with that scene
Yes. Oh,
because like
yes.
you kind of get the sense that the cooling agent probably should not be messed with before they even
Yeah.
go in the room, just
Oh,
off the
yeah.
way that they kind of frame it, right?
Mhm.
You're like, that's probably not great. This is
Yeah.
an alien film,
There's an
you
alarm going
know.
off.
And then,
Maybe you shouldn't have touched it.
well, and then they show you the row of a wall of facehuggers, and you
Yep.
go,
Oh.
they are gonna die. A part of me went, maybe some of those didn't survive. Maybe some of those are dead. Nope,
Nope.
they're all alive.
Oh.
They all survived like
Yep.
the thawing process.
Every single one.
And now they're in the water, running like a spider coming at you.
Blah. There's something
The
in
one
the
that
water.
jumped off the
There's something in the fucking
the
water.
cinematography. I love the red light choices in this. They use it so well in so many different ways. Like even the little X-ray flashlight thing is part of the red light in the dark gray setting. Like anyway, Andy freezes when he's uploading
I love
in that
that
scene.
It's
and then
so
the
weird.
red light and the alarms and the face huggers are melting and coming away, and then there's one that leaps off his shoulder.
And he grabs it at the last second too, like later. Oh,
yes.
all of it. So good. So good.
Such a good scene.
Again, with the idea of dialing it up to 11, which they kind of do in Aliens. You know, I don't want to take anything away from Aliens, but 30 years in, we've done the facehugger. We've done the facehugger a lot. We've done the facehugger with Predators. So I think they did some cool stuff with the facehuggers, and it's like with the changing of the temperature, the swimming around kind of thing. Like it was cool. I saw someone complaining about the temperature thing somewhere. I don't remember what it was. I think it worked for the most part.
I did put a note down for that. I think narratively it works, but a man, a woman, and a synth do not have the same internal body temperature. So that would not have been as foolproof as they wanted it to be, I don't think. Plus, if they can hear at all footfalls in a spaceship, that's gonna make noise, even if you're barefoot. So you're gonna have to suspend your disbelief for that scene, and like particularly for that scene. I think it's just there's no way that a synth has the same internal temperature as biological humans, and biological humans don't even have the same internal temperature based off of their gender or sex. So that was kind of a stretch
in this universe where acid-blooded aliens created by the engineer gods, they do. But my thought was you have control of the temperature of this hallway. You have the option to turn the heat up to match your internal body temperature and then pray to God nothing changes on the walk there. Or you could, I don't know, maybe freeze the room. And then as a warm-blooded mammal, just walk through it after they're cold and can't move. You know, like I don't remember if that was an option or not. I'm fairly certain it would have been.
Maybe environmental controls wouldn't have allowed that kind of freeze. It seems
but it would have been
unlikely on a ship designed to study the alien, but that's a possibility.
Maybe. Anyway, I do think like cinematically though it's fun. It is a little convenient that of course the sister ends up being in trouble. I can't remember her name. What is it? Was it Isabella or is that the actor's name?
K.
Isabella's the actor. K. I keep wanting to say Hawk Girl because she's Hawk Girl in Superman.
Yeah.
But anyway, Shaira, her being in trouble as soon as they're in there and they can't react to anything. That of course is convenient, but whatever. Also, this is also where this kind of starts to happen. The conflict of losing Andy to the company. Gut punch. What an interesting conflict to deal with, and like a fun one because it already established that we give a shit about Andy by the time he starts going to the dark side. So that was cool.
Well, I like that his turn isn't sudden. I like that it's something that slowly affects him, where the card or whatever is fixing his systems and he starts speaking and thinking and moving more smoothly. And so he kind of reveals what he could be in terms of like a fully functional synthetic, right? But it comes at a moral cost, right? Which is an interesting conversation if you want to talk about the way they're doing a kind of like learning disability metaphor with him.
Mm-hmm.
I have critiques, I guess, to be the way to put it. I don't think it's anything worth calling like problematic or anything like that. It's just it's not a perfect interpretation of the issue, and it only really works if you look at it outside of the sort of metaphor that people are inclined to put on it and say, no, he's not a person with learning disabilities. He's
Right. Yeah.
actually just a synthetic
Mm-hmm.
who has been repaired, and then he gets a chance, like then he gets a different piece of programming in him that fixes him but makes his priorities shift. Like it works much better if you take away the kind
Yeah.
of metaphor or analogy that you're trying to put on it instinctively.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
I
there's an
love
interesting thing to be
Andy
said
a
there, but
lot.
yeah,
So
me too.
yeah, I think I like that when Andy 2.0 showed up, there was a lot of genuinely him trying to help out.
Mm-hmm.
But then the moment it kind of turned into, am I trying to prioritize the company or prioritize my friends? He started prioritizing the company,
Mm-hmm.
which I liked in terms of our conversation about what the company does to society
Mm-hmm.
or to people, because ultimately there are those who you grew up with who end up taking the side of the
Right. Right.
oppressor.
Uh-huh.
And that is a loss for sure. And you have to struggle with that. So I think that actually works pretty well within the framework they've created for the company. And I liked that angst added in this film. I think it works pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of angst, I don't know how to feel fully about Bjorn because they do kind of incorporate some aspects as to why he'd be so cruel to Andy, but
Mm-hmm.
also I don't think he does enough good anything for us to care when he dies, and I kind of feel like
Mm-hmm.
maybe they should have. Like he just causes issues, and I
Mm-hmm.
realize a lot of this is probably going to come from the youth aspect of it, but to see the giant monster and know that you're even if it's your partner, to know they're infected and to just run away and abandon your friends because the robot is considering not letting you do that until they figure out what's what. I mean this it's just an unlikable character for me in the end.
I mean, I think this was before they even took off, but one of my earlier notes is, wow, Jordan sucks.
Yeah.
And then right next to it, I went, reminds me of Parker from the first film. They even
Uh-huh.
have the same headband.
Yeah.
The reason I'm a little bit less harsh on Parker is just because he happens to make it by some random chance closer to the end of the film, and he starts acting more like a human being when he's one of the last three survivors. So when he dies, you do kind of feel a little bit bad for him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I ever really felt bad for
No.
Jordan.
I and I want yeah, I don't feel bad for Bjorn, and I want to feel bad for Navarro, but I don't really think we get to spend enough time with her, or them. I'm not entirely certain, um, for us to really care. It's just it's rough that they get to deal with the chest burster, of course, and it is disgusting and
Yeah.
awful. We also get
The
introduced.
breaking ribs
I
thing.
know, ugh, but we
Mm.
get introduced to a new stage of life for the xenomorph, which I don't
Let's not.
really the chrysalis. We see the z like a full,
Yeah, okay. That's
which
fine.
I was mixed on because we don't know all the rules for the xenomorph, and we don't keep track of it every second of its life in the previous Alien movies. It's just we've never seen that before, so that was a little bit weird. Um, it's also such a strange kind of like, well, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, because we didn't with the dog. We just emerged fully formed from the dog.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Granted, different rules for the engineer, not quite a xenomorph. We did not talk about enough last week that the one that David makes, the protomorph, just emerges as a tiny little xenomorph right away, just fully formed. Whatever. Um, but it is a cool, nasty sequence. I just wonder why they felt the need to include that now, since we've never had to see that before. Um,
I think they were going more the womb route in this
oh, for
film.
sure, for sure.
So it kind of fits in with that theme a little bit, but it's more of an aesthetic than it is a logical progression.
Yeah.
So your point stands.
Yeah. The situation with like falling into the asteroid belt rings around the planet, I think that's cool. It's kind of just a cool take on the countdown MacGuffin that lots of movies have. It's kind of it is interesting. I think it's fun. The shot from inside the station when the ship jerks to the left as Navarro is, chest bursting, that was so cool. Like the lights from outside, that was really fun.
They got really lucky that the shuttle ended up inside.
Of course they did. Of course, that's a big convenience. But I'll take it. I'll take it. Let's see. The connection to Prometheus in this movie, I think, is fun. Them being able to dilute or create or recover the black goo and trace it back a little bit to try to weaponize it. That's interesting. A fun connection. A fun way to connect Prometheus and Alien as a whole.
Well, and I wondered where they were going with the whole Romulus and Remus thing, because Romulus is not something that you reference without referencing the story of Romulus and Remus, which are twins. And they were talking about how the station is split in two. And I was like, so what is the second thing? Like, you're quite literally waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it ended up being that they were trying to create like a perma vaccine is kind of what I was thinking of it as, where you get injected with the goo of life and you never die. Which, now that I think about it, is a very natural progression from Wayland's obsession, but it is different from what the company has wanted from its classic films, which is they want a weapon, right? Not necessarily that's longevity.
That
or
is
health.
An unfortunate thing of where the movie is placed, is we never get to see that really fully explored again until Ripley, like 200, 600 years later, by accident. Like Ripley 8 has a bunch of cool xenomorph abilities by accident. So, yeah. I also they do this in all the movies technically, because the xenomorph's biological abilities are all over the place. They kind of yada yada over how they get all the other facehuggers, because the xenomorphs are around because they got out like they always do, and they've been, building a nest at the bottom of the station. But where did the scientists get all the facehuggers?
Assumed they were breeding them.
How? Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
Floating.
So that's I guess that's just a bit weird. But
they had a lot of them too. Like, it wasn't just the one room. There were carts around the station that were.
It wasn't just that there were eggs around, like in the space jockey ship or in the bowels of the terraforming station in Aliens. The scientists had them all locked up and all frozen and all organized and all contained. It was a little strange. But the use of the gravity thing I mentioned before, but like towards the end, I think that was awesome. Floating around through the acid blood.
I mean,
that was
setup
cool.
is pretty obvious in the beginning, in the terms of they're like how a gravity generator.
Chekhov's gravity was definitely there, but I was all for it. That's a fun thing.
I did not interpret them using it that way. I definitely thought it was going to be a fight scene, which it kind of was, but I thought it was going to be more like, because the humans know the purge is coming, they have the advantage, and the aliens don't. But they ended up using it as a way to prevent acid from corroding the hull, which I'm not sure if that's exactly how that would actually work in real life, but it was clever enough that I'll let it stand for the film.
Yeah, we'll give it a pass. We'll give it a pass. Let's see, other things that I wanted to touch on before we get to like the really, really good stuff. Well, I mean, we talked about some good stuff.
The desk toy?
Of course, the very beginning. Of course, yes. The little bird, that's appeared in a bunch of them.
Usually next to a synthetic. So I figured we were going to be introduced to our synthetic that scene. And then it was really obvious that Andy was synthetic. And I went, oh, I thought I was going to have to guess. I thought it was getting clued in. No, I was just told directly.
I think it was kind of fun. So I did see, in all honesty, this was something CinemaSins pointed out. Andy, when he takes out the last like xenomorph that they fight together, says, "Get away from her, you bitch," which is like for audience members, that's a reference to Ripley saying, "Get away from her, you bitch." Except technically that hasn't happened yet, so that's referencing something that has not occurred. However, I do think it's set up fairly naturally,
It is.
technically,
Yeah.
because when he's attacked by the kids, Rain runs out of that office and says, "Get away from him, you bastards." So he just flips it in the most natural way to get away from her, you bitch. And I appreciate that. I think it's fun. I think that's a fun way to call that in. Also, "Get away from her, you bitch" is like not the most original thing ever. You know, people say it all the time.
I am not bothered by that one. That's like the Terminator films always saying, I'll be back.
Right.
They maybe have a slightly more diegetic reason for doing it because it's usually the same person who says it,
Mm-hmm.
or character. But it's, I don't know. Like other characters say it, and you're just like, yeah, that's good. And it's not necessarily something that would be so unusual to say that it makes no sense. It's
Yeah.
not like the secret passphrase or anything. It's just a phrase that has become iconic because of its use in one of the films, and therefore feels like a reference every time you use it. Probably is a reference every time you use it. But like, no one has to say that. Like Andy doesn't have to witness anyone saying that
Right.
before he does.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think
it's not a world breaking thing.
no, not at all. I just think it is clearly a reference, but I like that they actually set it up naturally in the movie for him for that to be something he would say. It's a little weird that the xenomorph catches her when she's falling down the elevator shaft. Not the worst thing ever because they want fresh meat and all that, but it's still a little. It's how gentle that the thing is when it does it.
Sure.
I mean, she could have easily just skewered her with her tail, but she doesn't. She wraps her up in it. It's like, oh, thank you so much. You know, don't even have whiplash. So that's a little.
Well, it's not like we haven't seen the skewer thing to transport before. They just
right. They do that all the
wanted a
time.
moment. So, yeah.
I think this is a good point though to hop to the big thing of this movie. This
Okay.
can you understand now though why I had such an issue with Alien Resurrection and the child? It's because in context now, it doesn't compare. The offspring kicks ass. And so that's
Sure.
a couple of little things real quick and then I want your opinion on it. I want to let you talk. So when I mentioned before, Robert Bobrozetsky, that's the guy who plays the offspring.
Okay.
It is a it's like it's makeup. He's 24 years old and he's 7'7". He's a huge guy. So it's like it's makeup that they put on him. That's why it looks so good. And that's why I was so confused at first. Like, wow, the CGI looks so good. It's like, it's not CGI. They did that shit. And I'm gonna submit to the jury that the moment that Andy turns around when Kay points and we see it in the hallway, that is the most frightening moment of the entire Alien franchise, period.
I'd give it to you. I'd give it to
that
you.
is so creepy. I just want to hear you talk now. I just want to hear you talk.
I find it so unsettling. I mean, I was actually really impressed. Like, my younger sister has totally influenced my vocabulary because out of instinct, I wrote down when Rain is like, she's handling the fact that, okay, my friend just gave birth to an alien. I've got to get this off the ship, right? She is handling it so well. I wrote down, she's really cooking. It's like
she cooked. Mm-hmm.
She cooked. But she's immediately taking the right kind of action. Of course, she, it starts burning her hands, and then she immediately goes and gets the thing, and then she but the thing that stops her is when it looks like a human on the inside. And as much as I want to critique her, because this is something I would normally critique characters for, right? This moment of shock is causing you potential death down the line, man. Like, step up. I think I also would probably be thrown just a little bit if I looked into this alien thing and saw a little human baby curled up in there. And then not 30 seconds later, it comes out looking all Slender Man. And it's so gross, dude. The way that they had it move and like it's still kind of evolving as that scene happens. Like the tail is still growing.
I think about that every single time. I think it's brilliant. It's so cool. It's awful, but it's amazing. And the fact that they made it look like an engineer.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes, I saw that too.
Oh my god. Just incredible.
Dude,
awful, terrifying, incredible. I technically just slightly had it spoiled for me before I was able to see the movie. I
Oh
hadn't seen like a
no.
clear shot of it. I just saw like the silhouette, so I knew something like that was going to happen. I didn't know how. I didn't know to what extent. If I didn't know that was going to happen, that hallway scene probably would have given me nightmares, full blown. Because it's
That is something that I've had nightmares about before. Like I Am Legend is the only movie
I
that
was gonna
really
say I was gonna be like I Am Legend because oh my god, it's just it's it's like the level of they fully just utilize the fact that it's creepy looking. It's not
Mhm.
running, it's not even
Mm-mm.
standing. It's just the pure utter holy fucking shit. What is that? That drives that moment. There's not even like a horror movie jump scare note that they would do. It's just its face and its arms. And it's
Mhm.
brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
It is really brilliant, as you're saying, to rely so heavily on the horror of the nature of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, random weird reference, but I've been listening to the Magnus Archives, and it's a horror narrative podcast. It's horror might be the wrong term, but it's very like kind of thriller. It operates
Mm-hmm.
in the realm of fear. And it's been interesting because it introduces a bunch of different kinds of things to be afraid of, a bunch of different monsters that take a bunch of different incarnations. This thing is the worst thing potentially ever conceived.
Mm-hmm.
Like this,
Yeah.
the offspring is, and it's not even shocking in terms of I had never even considered it as a possibility because I fully had,
Yeah.
especially given Resurrection. Like, what
Yeah.
would
We've already
a
had a
like,
human
human?
alien
Yeah,
hybrid. Like we've had it. And Romulus is like, "Oh
but
no, you haven't."
the way they made it look so human and yet solidly in the uncanny valley category, and also the way that it behaved was so predatory as well. Like, and the fact they chose to make so much of the choreography with it slow too, like it
Yes.
just kind of like rather than running at you or spooking you, it just sort of like crawls up on you, and it's monstrous, and the character's not in any shape to try and like really get away from it. um it's awful, horrible creation. Well done, A plus. I don't want to see it again. We're done.
Yeah. Very much so. Side note to that though, the reason it exists is a little weird. I don't know why Kay injects herself in the end because she doesn't fully know what that's gonna do or what that was. It's just it's set in
It's
front of
impressive on her that it might make her survive.
yeah, but the only thing she heard was it worked on the rat. And if even if I was dying, I'd be like, I don't really know what that means. I don't really want to do that. But she does, which is a
Well,
little bizarre.
I also think it's a failure on the character's part, failure in writing, really, that they didn't see the massive cage completely destroyed by
Same.
the
Same.
exploded rat. Like,
Same.
it's not hidden in a corner anywhere.
No,
It's
not at
right
all.
out there in the
Yeah.
open.
Mm-hmm. They
It
pulled
would be eye catching.
yeah, they pulled an Amazing Spider-Man 1, but they didn't utilize it fully. Because Peter learns that the rat turned into a lizard. They should have learned, but you know, again,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose. I do think it's a little strange that the offspring does kill her. There's
Mm-hmm.
this universe has implied that there is a little bit of weird recognition in the
Mm-hmm.
xenomorph offspring, more applying to all of them thing when it comes to their mothers. So that was a
It
little
is
strange.
strange that there would be no, given the precedent set with other human alien hybrids, um, it's weird that she wouldn't be a part of the hive mind.
Mm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
it was in her bloodstream. Um, she had like an alien engineered thing inside of her.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like maybe because it's focused more on her womb than anything else, maybe it wouldn't, but it kind of feels like it should. And I think a part of the conversation here we should throw in is that what's weird about the offspring is that it looks so human but acts so animalistic.
Mm.
What's weird about, what is it, the daughter or whatever, the
In Resurrection, I think it's called The Child. I think.
The Child. What's weird about The Child is that it looks so alien and yet acts kind of like a toddler.
Interesting point.
So they've kind of flipped it, and obviously they've designed a creepier monster, I think. I still like The Child's design. I know we had a disagreement on that. Yeah. I still like The Child's design. But I like it because it forces sympathy, whereas this one is all repulsion. Mm-hmm. You do not want to be around it. And that's a very interesting phenomenon to look at, why something that looks more human would be more unsettling than something that looks less human but has some human characteristic to engage sympathy. Sure. It's interesting.
Yeah. We're almost at our time. So I had really only one other thing that I really wanted to touch on real quick. And I don't love the ending exactly. It's the only thing that I would have changed. And like some of our previous episodes, I wanted to run that by you real quick. I think.
Sure, how so?
So for one, I love how they play up Ripley's go-to weapon is a flamethrower. Rain's is an ice beam thing. Like that.
Yeah, awesome. Ice thrower is what I called it.
Yes, awesome. Mm-hmm. Love that. Love all that. But we still kind of have the whole like blowing the monster out the airlock. And I get that technically it works within this. However, I think that they could have done something really sweet. What are you shaking your head at? No, don't you shake your head. They've done that so many times. They had a chance. I know,
and that's intentional.
Let me finish. Let me finish. I think they could have. So like, a lot of things in this movie are pretty obviously check-offed guns in this. I think they could have done a bunch of that and it'd be way less obvious. So I think the station should have had more like higher up escape pods, similar to the ship in Prometheus, like a little extra ship. Not something that a lot of people could use. Something for the higher up scientists or for executives who would have been on the station. And you could have even talked about them. It's like, well, there's cryo chambers on those. Like, yeah, but it's only one, and it's built into it. And as the ship goes down, an automatic response, as the station goes down fully, an automatic response is that those things would be ejected. And then while they're on their ship, Rain, who's still dealing with company Andy, puts together the plan as to what to do. And so the movie showed us things being ejected from the station earlier, which we then repeat. It showed Bjorn zapping Andy and that freezing him long enough for them to do anything to him. And we have, I don't know, maybe they do something with gravity. But my point is, what they could have done in the end is Rain gets in a spacesuit, gets to the airlock, and ejects herself out of the ship as it's falling down into the ring. Abandoning the ship, she zapped Andy and takes him with her to fix him later, and then uses the gun, which she used earlier in the anti-gravity, to project herself towards the ship that doesn't exist, that was ejected from the station, to go into that, and that's how she leaves. Twisting this whole eject the thing out into space narrative that they've done, and not doing that to the monster, doing that to herself, utilizing all these other things that she learned throughout the story, this adventure on the space station, to do something completely different that was fully built naturally and utilizes the classic alien airlock thing, but not the same way it's been done 5 times already. That is my pitch. Thank you for listening.
Pretty good pitch. I think it would work pretty well, especially if you set it up like shot wise to lead the audience to think they're going to get another alien out the airlock shot, and then at the last second they kind of reverse it so the alien gets trapped inside the airlock and Rain shoots out to freedom. That's pretty solid. I think it's better than what they have.
Although
I will say,
oh damn it,
I it's not an argument against, because like I said, I think you're right. I think that ending that you're proposing is better. I do like that the final fight takes place in the closest thing to a coal mine that they could create
That's
in the
true.
environment.
That's very good.
They're in the cargo hold. They're in amongst the stuff that she has to like work with or would have had to work with, right? So I think the return to sort of on the hero's journey, that was their symbolic return to home sort of moment, which I liked the parallels of. And I think you could do all of what you just said, but with the acid in the cargo hold.
Mm. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I can appreciate that. I had not considered the whole coal mine thing.
But I don't know. I don't even think that part's necessary. I think your end was a little bit more interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just it would subvert expectations. It would utilize everything done in the movie, and it would just. I think it'd be an amazing sequence. That's the only thing.
It's like a situation where you have the same ingredients, but you end up with a different recipe just because you do something slightly different. It's good.
And like how I'm imagining it in my mind is it happens so fast, and you put the pieces together very much like Inside Out. I know how that sounds. It's a ridiculous comparison, but the way Joy gets back to headquarters is so fast, and it's utilizing all these pieces that we've seen throughout the movie, and you wouldn't have thought twice about it. And it comes together in a way that works. That's what I'm imagining. That's the only thing I would change. Everything else, I think, honestly, is pretty solid. 'Tis a Whale, I should say. We're at the end here. 'Tis a Whale.
Sure.
It's a very fun movie. I'd say this is either... I'd say this is second best of the whole franchise. You could argue maybe the best because of how well it utilizes the xenomorph lore, but I don't think it beats Aliens quite yet.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think I have less maybe at stake in quotes on ranking this in the sense that I don't know that I have super strong feelings about the order of the films and their quality, but I think Aliens is the best one. This one was pretty good. The first one was pretty good. And then the others you kind of have to like sort a little bit pros and cons wise.
I could do it like hopping back and forth. I would say Aliens is the best. Alien 3 is the worst. And then I'd say maybe Prometheus and Resurrection might be tied because there's interesting things in both, but they're both really dumb. I'd almost argue Prometheus is dumber. It's just more visually beautiful. Covenant is the one that I think sits in the very middle. I think there's good stuff, there's dumb stuff, there's cool stuff, there's stupid stuff, there's beautiful stuff, there's lame stuff. Like
that's kind of how I feel about Resurrection. I think there's a lot of really dumb stuff in Resurrection, but ultimately the stuff that's there that's interesting is really interesting. So like I'm kind of willing to push back the stuff that's silly.
I like the horror of Covenant better than I like the lampoonishness of Resurrection. Yeah. So
I think Covenant takes itself quite a bit more seriously, and David is a fascinating character to spin the whole movie around. So, and I don't disagree.
If you had to line up the xenomorphs we've been presented as well, top 3 for me, the neomorph would be in there. The neomorph is so creepy. It's definitely the weird white skin, which is something again that lines up with the engineers. I would definitely put that up there, especially up against the gross brown one, the xenomorph from Alien 3, you know, like but I think that's it. That's the Alien franchise. How do you feel having watched them all now?
Alien franchise. I'm glad I've watched them. I might even rewatch a few of them, but I don't know that I'll ever do a full franchise watch again.
Yeah, I can understand that. There's very little reason to watch Alien 3.
Yeah, well, and it's also like, I don't really know that these movies are improved by watching them back to back to back. Some movies are written so well and so, like, in step with each other that it feels like a fun experience to watch them together. But the only movies in this franchise that I think would be satisfying to do that way would be Alien, the first one, Aliens, and Romulus. The rest of them take dramatically different notes and would end up feeling weird or dissonant if we were to watch them alongside the rest of the franchise. If we're gonna do like a crazy 20-hour marathon or whatever, and you're going to watch them all back to back to back, I think the weaknesses of the other films will be highlighted rather than lessened.
Oh, absolutely. I think you could really enjoy yourself. You could watch this as Prometheus, Covenant, Alien, Alien Romulus, Aliens, and it ends there. You then tell whoever you're watching it with that Ripley and what's his name? Hicks and Newt all lived happily ever after. They made it to a planet, and it was totally fine, and nothing happened after that. Period. End of story. Done.
The end.
Perfect. Not quite a perfect marathon, but a fairly solid, interesting marathon. You fill in some gaps. You say that David came across another engineer somehow, which created the space jockey in the Alien movie. Headcanon a little bit, whatever. Maybe even play the the Isolation game. It's fine. It works. But you end at Aliens. You don't do Alien Cubed, which is what that technically looks like, and you don't do Alien Resurrection. You just know. Yeah. Just know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just gotta cut out 2 whole movies.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I think I'd cut out Prometheus too, because as fascinating as it is, it makes me so mad. And if I'm not watching Prometheus, I don't really know that it makes sense for me to watch Covenant. So like
the only
Alien,
reason,
Romulus, and then Aliens. That's it for me.
Yeah, the only reason to watch Prometheus is just so you understand what it is, what the black goo is from Romulus, because Covenant doesn't explore it fully. But maybe it's not entirely worth it. That's us, though. Aliens done. We are moving on to something way lighter, but just as action-packed, but more fun. We're doing Pirates next week. It's very exciting until the ending, like so many of these marathons. But whatever. It's going to be good for most of it. So stay tuned, as they say. Whatever. Bye.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
they're not here.
Shut up.